At the start, we meet an 80-year-old billionaire who's as bold as they come. In court, facing charges, he audaciously tells the judge to be quiet just so he can enjoy his cup of expensive Kopi Luwak coffee in peace. He then turns to his lawyer, setting the scene for what's about to unfold.
That's right, Phil. Give him the spiel.
Just as you'd think the lawyer was about to get the judge in trouble, the billionaire suddenly coughs up a large amount of blood. He's rushed to the hospital, and upon turning around he's faced with the sight of a black man in the bed next to him.
What the hell is that?
Who the hell are you?
The billionaire immediately demands a private room, given that he owns the hospital. However, the doctors remind him that he's publicly declared his hospital a place of healing, not a resort, leaving him no choice but to accept the shared room.
2 beds to a room. No exceptions.
Before surgery, the nurses shave his head and he realizes despite his wealth he has no friends or family visiting him. Post-surgery, his bedside remains empty, and he can't help but mockingly note how most patients probably die from loneliness rather than their illnesses, especially when he sees the black man's wife by his side. The next day, the doctors inform the billionaire that he needs chemotherapy. The black man, who has been in the hospital for months, reassures him that chemotherapy isn't as bad as it seems, except for the occasional vomiting, watching his skin darken, and losing his hair in clumps. That night after chemotherapy, the billionaire tries to flaunt his wealth by indulging in front of the black man, but soon all his gourmet food ends up in the toilet. The rest of the night is spent in discomfort, either shivering in bed or feeding the toilet. When he sees the black man's son come to visit and then looks at his own gaunt reflection, the billionaire can't help but reflect on his situation.
Somewhere, some lucky guy's having a heart attack.
Perhaps softened by his illness or envious of the black man's family visits, the two finally have a meaningful conversation. The black man named Carter has 3 children, a lawyer, an engineer, and a violinist. Carter once taught at a university, but his wife's unexpected pregnancy changed everything. Young, black, and broke with a child on the way, life flashed by, turning youthful dreams into eternal regrets. The billionaire Edward started his hustle at 16 and went through 4 failed marriages. Love and sustenance seemed mutually exclusive. No matter how in love they were, they drifted apart. Thus, fate brought 2 men from different walks of life together in the same hospital room. Due to the side effects of chemotherapy, they spend their nights alternating between rushing to the bathroom to vomit and shivering uncontrollably. Perhaps it's their shared suffering that quickly bonds them, leading to endless conversations, whether they're playing cards late into the night or chatting while pushing their IV stands down the hallway. Carter even goes as far as to write down his bucket list, pondering if his life entered its final countdown he might choose his own way to depart from this world. One day, the doctor brings devastating news to Edward. According to the latest tests, he has less than a year to live. Edward, surprisingly calm, is more concerned about how much time Carter has left. It turns out their prognoses are nearly identical, with both having less than a year remaining. This sudden revelation leaves Carter dazed, his freshly written bucket list crumpled in despair, his eyes reflecting a deep sense of loss and reluctance to let go. The following morning, as the first rays of dawn light up the hospital room, their spirits somewhat lifted. Edward, driven by curiosity, picks up Carter's discarded list and reads through his final wishes, witnessing a true miracle, making a stranger laugh until they cry, and driving a Ford Mustang at full speed. Edward teases Carter for the lack of creativity in his list, but knowing his own life is also nearing its end, Carter has lost hope in fulfilling these dreams. However, the list sparks something in Edward, leading him to add a few of his own ideas before inviting Carter to join him in making these wishes come true. Edward assures Carter not to worry about the finances and encourages living for oneself, regardless of the circumstances. Carter is eventually persuaded by Edward's enthusiasm, and just as they agree to embark on this journey together, Carter's wife arrives for a visit. Edward tactfully exits, giving the couple some privacy. Carter eagerly discusses his plans with his wife, hoping to fulfill his wishes before he dies. However, she fails to understand his perspective, accusing him of being selfish and disregarding his family. Despite her objections, Carter is determined to set off on this unknown adventure. Thus, 2 terminally ill men begin the final journey of their lives. Skydiving is a terrifying prospect for Carter, who had always feared flying, let alone jumping out of a plane. Despite his fears, he's coaxed into jumping by the instructor, with Edward following closely behind. Their figures, one red and one yellow, blossom like brilliant rainbows against the backdrop of the blue sky and white clouds. Later, they visit a tattoo parlor, where only Edward ends up getting inked while Carter watches silently. After the tattoo session, they head to a racetrack where 2 stunning Ford Mustangs await, fulfilling one of Carter's lifelong dreams. Edward, using his wealth, rents the track for an exclusive race between the two, creating a memorable experience just for them. On the racetrack, Carter experiences the thrill of speeding for the first time. As he presses the accelerator harder, he makes a bold move and swerves, crashing into Edward's car. This leads to a high-speed chase around the track, ending with Edward's car unfortunately stalling, making Carter the winner of the race. Later, dining at an upscale restaurant by the sea, Edward becomes sentimental, reminded of the times he used to dine there with his 3rd wife who gave him a daughter named Emily. However, since his divorce, Emily has been estranged, and it's been a long time since they shared a meal together. Hearing this, Carter adds meeting Emily to the bucket list, touching Edward's deepest wounds. Edward, uncomfortable with Carter meddling in his personal affairs, insists on removing this wish from the list. Suddenly, Carter's demeanor changes and he rushes to the bathroom, leaving Edward puzzled. Following Carter to the bathroom, Edward discovers Carter's condition has worsened, his white shirt stained with blood, causing Edward great alarm. While Edward is worried about Carter's health, Carter's wife calls, accusing Edward of taking her husband away and expressing her fear of not being by her side when he dies. Understanding the gravity of the situation, Edward tries to reason with Carter, who simply wishes to experience what true life feels like in his final moments. Edward is deeply moved by Carter's resolve. They drive to the African savannah to witness the majestic sight of wildebeests crossing the river, singing at the edge of the grasslands under the blue sky, and enjoying dinner in a tent under the evening sky. Their journey then takes them to Egypt, where they gaze upon the towering pyramids, a sight that moves Edward, though Carter cautions him not to jump to conclusions too soon. Carter then steers the conversation towards theology, using it as a way to inquire about Edward's family and whether he's made anyone happy. Caught off guard, Edward shares the story of his daughter Emily, who fell for a gentleman in college, only to see his true abusive nature after marriage. After hearing of the first instance of domestic abuse, Edward wanted to confront the man but was stopped by Emily. When it happened again, Edward, without Emily's consent, had the man beaten to the point of disability. Instead of gratitude, Emily cut off all ties with her father. Edward expresses that given another chance he would make the same choices, believing that defending his daughter's honor is what makes him a good father. On their journey, they arrive at the base of Mount Everest, intending to climb to the top as a testament to witnessing a miracle. However, just as they prepare to ascend, an assistant brings two pieces of unfortunate news. A severe blizzard is expected on the mountain, and it won't subside until the following spring. Carter feels a mix of frustration and resignation upon hearing this, but Edward sees it as a positive sign, suggesting it means they are meant to live until next spring. With their climbing plans dashed, they temporarily divert to Hong Kong. While Carter is at a bar in Hong Kong, a woman strikes up a conversation with him about Everest, sharing her own experiences of climbing it. She describes the breathtaking night sky at high altitudes filled with stars that seem close enough to touch, despite the lack of oxygen to refract sunlight. Carter is captivated by her stories, filled with longing for Everest. Suddenly, the woman invites him to her room for a drink, and Carter realizes she was sent by Edward, recalling a similar insinuation during their tattoo session. Despite this, Carter declines the woman's offer, his thoughts returning to his wife waiting for him at home. He and Edward board a plane back to the United States. However, on their way home, Edward senses something is off and realizes this detour is part of Carter's plan to reconcile Edward with his estranged daughter. Unexpectedly, Carter's well-intentioned plan infuriates Edward, who exits the car, rebuking Carter for overstepping his bounds and questioning his right to interfere in his life. After this outburst, Edward tears up the bucket list and storms off while Carter decides to return to his wife. Carter's return home underscores the warmth and refuge found in family, the very reason he encouraged Edward to reconnect with his own. That night, Carter enjoys a long-missed dinner with his family, while Edward faces a cold, lonely room. Reflecting on his fear of further hurt and misunderstandings with his daughter, choosing to bury his feelings under work and illness. Unbeknownst to Edward, the person who truly cared for him, Carter faces a life-threatening crisis, collapsing while with his wife and being rushed to the hospital. Upon hearing the news, Edward, who was in a meeting, rushes to the hospital. Their unexpected reunion is marked by brief exchanges and greetings, but Carter's illness doesn't deter him from playfully teasing Edward. He hands Edward a note revealing that the expensive coffee Edward loves is actually made from cat feces, humorously implying Edward's favorite flavor is essentially cat poop. This revelation leads to a burst of laughter between them, filled with joy and tears, but also a sense of helplessness and farewell. Struggling to catch his breath from laughing, Carter asks Edward for a pen, takes out the hospital list they had put together, and crosses off the item about making someone laugh until they cry. He then hands the list to Edward, entrusting him with the task of fulfilling the remaining wishes as if it were his last will. That night, Carter is taken back into surgery, but he passes away, leaving behind a mix of sorrow, regret, and longing. Edward, carrying a heavy heart, reads a letter from Carter, who apologizes for his rash action of bringing Edward to Emily's doorstep. Carter expresses that given another chance, he would still help Edward reconcile with his family without hesitation. This realization helps Edward understand that Carter, even in his final moments, was thinking of Edward's family. Motivated by this, Edward decides to mend fences and knocks on his daughter's door. Leading to a thawing of their long-standing grievances, the door opens. Inside, Emily introduces Edward to his granddaughter, allowing him to fulfill another wish on the list by kissing the most beautiful girl in the world, his great-granddaughter. Edward attends Carter's funeral, mourning the loss of a friend who had become as dear as a lifelong companion in just 3 months. It's Edward's first time attending someone's funeral by choice, where he comforts many strangers, fulfilling another wish by offering kindness to those he doesn't know. Finally, when the snow stops falling in the Himalayas the following spring, an assistant scatters Carter and Edward's ashes atop the serene and timeless mountains, bringing the poignant journey and their shared bucket list to a meaningful conclusion. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this.